Hello, I'm Stephen Hustedde, and I will be your guide through the fascinating jungle of Adobe Photoshop. We'll start our journey with a cruise through the interface of Photoshop. Our itinerary for this first unit is to have 10 stops exploring the various aspects of the Photoshop workspace from a higher vantage point to get a good lay of the land. Along the way, we'll take some side excursions to examine important associated topics like file types, color, and basic design principles. The Photoshop Practicum curriculum focuses more on the technical side of Photoshop than the artistic side. I'm not qualified to teach art, but at the same time, we really can't fully separate the two views, the technical view and the artistic or design view. So I'll provide some basic principles and rules of good design, at least from my perspective. In each week of our journey, or unit from an educational perspective, we will focus on different aspects of effectively and efficiently using Photoshop for many different tasks and uses. We'll start with the Photoshop tour and then delve into making adjustments to images, selecting subjects or areas of an image, and working with layers. From my experience, those are the three keys to mastering this software: adjustments, selections, and layers. And those three things go hand in hand together. In week 5, we'll look at typography, adding text and designing with text. In week 6, we'll explore vector tools in Photoshop to draw scalable items such as shapes and icons. In week 7 or unit 7, I call the fun stuff, though it could be retitled as the magic stuff. And it includes artificial intelligence abilities, filters for really cool effects, and painting with customizable brushes. Week 8, or unit 8, is our finishing touches. We'll conclude that last destination with automation techniques, batch processing, and some higher-end photography processes of working with camera raw and high definition range or HDR imaging. Let's start the journey with a bird's eye view of the Photoshop landscape, and then we'll drop down for a closer look at each area of the interface. Throughout all the videos, I'd suggest pausing throughout as needed to examine everything yourself firsthand in Photoshop. I'm just your guide. The actual learning is on you. The best practice is to make this an active experience rather than a passive one. So here's a tip. You can use Alt-Tab in Windows or Command-Tab on the Macintosh to toggle between the video and the Adobe Photoshop. So pause here and let's start up Adobe Photoshop and then come back and we'll explore together. Let the journey begin. Let's open up Photoshop. You'll be greeted with a splash screen. I'm just going to click the little X up here to close that splash screen. We see recent files that were opened. Let's go ahead and go to the File menu and just choose New. And we're going to go to Photo up here at the top. And let's do a default Photoshop size of 7 by 5 inches at 300 ppi. So I'll click Create. And so what we're looking at is the Photoshop interface, or what we more commonly call to as the workspace. Now there's lots of different workspaces. When we think about it, artists have their own workspace environments and tools of the trade that are conducive to the work they do in their individual workflow. Traditional photographers have worked in photography darkrooms, aided by red lights, enlargers, developing trays, and chemicals, while animation artists sat at desks with a rotating light board, character models, markers, and paints. Videographers and animation editors had unique tools, including Disney's patented multiplane camera. Painters and fine art artists often work with easels, watercolors, acrylics, or oil paints, and various types of brushes, and even painting knives. And a comic book illustrator might have their own unique working environment, while a greeting card designer, typographer, or calligrapher uses a variety of pens and brushes. And just as artists of different media have their own working spaces, Photoshop provides unique arrangements of its panels and access to its tools based on the type of artistry we wish to perform. Different workspaces are found under the Window menu, and you'll find a submenu for workspaces. We'll revisit these in more depth in a later video and discover how we can even create our own custom workspace environments to match our own unique workflow. But for now, I'd like you to just choose the Essentials default workspace so we're all on the same page looking at the same interface. Let's take a bird's eye view of the Essential workspace in Photoshop. The feature area, of course, is our document. That's here in the center. You'll see a tab up here that we haven't saved our document, so this is Untitled 1. It displays some information here that it's being viewed at 50%, and we're using a red, green, blue 8-bit color model. I can go to the File menu and choose Open, and maybe open a couple more documents, and you'll see that we'll get tabs across the top for those different documents, and I can move between those documents using the tabs. I can also go to the Window menu and choose Tile All vertically, Arrange Tile All horizontally, and there's various other formats here for viewing those. Typically, I work in the tab view, consolidate all the tabs. Now, one thing we can do is we can take one of these documents and we can actually pull the tab down and separate it from the other documents. So I can maybe drag an item from one document to another document. And if I want to bring it back to the tab, it's dockable and I can just drag it back up. I'm going to close those two additional documents. Actually, I'm going to leave one open. You can open any document you like. I'm going to go back to my untitled one though. The second area is our Tools palette or panel. That's over here on the left-hand side by default. I just want to demonstrate there's a little title bar at the top with two little chevrons. You can click the chevrons and that'll make it a double column panel or toggle back to the single column. I traditionally work in the single column. I can also pull it off by grabbing that title and reposition somewhere. So it's what we call a floating panel. And again, I can grab it and bring it back over to get the blue line and dock it on the left again. There's ruler bars on the left and top surrounding our document window that correspond to our measurement system, which we set up as pixels in the preferences. But at any point, you can right click on those and change the measurements. So maybe you want to work in inches, you can have that ruler be inches or points. I'm going to go back to pixels, and both rulers change at the same time. Under the View menu, we can turn those rulers on and off. Typically, I like to have the rulers on, and that's our default mode. As we're working with different tools, there is a options bar that changes based on the tool we're using. So it's context sensitive. For example, if I take the marquee tool, this little dotted box that we see here, this is a selection tool, and I can change different things on this menu. So there's one here on style that says normal. And with normal, I can drag a rectangular selection of any size. If, however, I come in and say fixed ratio, I can set, maybe I want something that's twice as wide as it is tall, and now it constrains my mouse to do a 2:1 ratio. And then finally, there's a fixed size where I can specify the dimensions. In this case, it's pixels, and give me 1280 by 720 pixels. If I choose, say, the type tool, you'll notice that the options bar has changed. And it's going to basically change with every tool we select. Later, we'll be going through all the tools and looking at the different options. There, of course, is also the menu bar we've already seen, and going to the Windows menu and choosing a workspace. But there's an edit menu. So I have a selection right now made for my selection marquee. I can go to the edit menu and I can choose fill, and I can fill with my foreground color, which is down here on the ruler bar. It's black, so there's black and white here. Yours might be different. I'm going to click OK, and notice it fills it with that color. Anytime you're working in Photoshop, you can do a Control Z, which is the same as going to the edit menu and choosing undo. To deselect something, keyboard shortcut is Control D or Command D on the Mac. That's a good keyboard shortcut to remember whichever system you're using. There's also an information tray at the bottom. Shows us the size of our document in this case, and there's various things we can choose to change the display of that information at the bottom. If I want to know what the dimensions are of the document, I can choose document dimensions, and that's what I'm going to see on the bottom. Then we have a bunch of panels over on the right-hand side. So we have some panels that are grouped together. There's swatches, these are tabbed colors, and gradients, those all deal with colors. There's one down here for properties, adjustments, information. Then we have layers, channels, and paths. We're going to work a lot with layers. That's one panel we'll use a lot, much more so than channels and paths. Then there are some more panels over here that are actually docked and shrunk, but we can go click on any one of these icons and see the panel for history or comments, character, paragraph, layer comps, and notes. With any of these, I can also go and pull that tab out and separate it from that docked bar. In the same way, I can pull it back and dock it in that bar. These panels can be adjusted, so I can slide panels around and give them more real estate or make them smaller. And then finally, under the Windows menu, you're going to see there's a lot more panels that we can use as we're working with Photoshop. You may have noticed that there are check marks in front of the panels that we're seeing, as well as tools and options in our documents. All the documents that we have open are listed at the bottom, and we can swap to those documents as there under the Windows menu, as well as the tabs. But I can do things like turn options off, turn them back on. So we have full control of our interface, but one thing that happens sometimes, maybe accidentally to somebody, is they click the tab key. Let me show you what that does. Everything disappeared as far as our panels and our tools. This is called a presentation mode. You might find this helpful. You want to show your work to somebody without the distraction of the environment. If this happens to you, the way to get back to everything is just press the tab key again, and that toggles everything back on. I know the interface is overwhelming because there's a lot of stuff here, but we're going to approach it as the proverbial how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. We'll look at more in depth about each of these different areas, and we're going to start with documents. If you'd like to see more videos in the Photoshop Practicum playlist, click the title at the bottom. If you'd like to be alerted to new videos, please click my photo in the top right to subscribe to the channel.